My name's Clayton, and I'm an alcoholic. Um, I've had a lot in my mind today. I knew I wanted to do a video on going through the fourth step of AA. And at one point, I thought I was going to kind of like preface it about some things, concepts I'd had run through my head after my work day and some discussion I had with some people around me. But as I sat down to do it, I think just jumping into the fourth step is still prudent to the topics I had in mind. Um, Step four of AA made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. That was the funny thing for me about a searching and fearless moral inventory was that I didn't have to search. It was all there. I had just fought it for so long and told myself it wasn't true for every time it would come into my head is that wasn't the right thing that I did at that moment. I would somehow convince myself A, it didn't happen, or B, it was the right thing. And I didn't have to go looking for any of the things. It wasn't necessary to search. Everything I ever did is all here. It's always been there. But it was the truth that I wasn't seeing. I wasn't allowing myself to see. I was distracting myself from with a number of things, uh, any number, video games, um, my drinking, projects around the house that I half-heartedly did to occupy time. Um, some other things I won't discuss in a YouTube video. Um, Searching I didn't have to do. Fearless, fearless. That was going to be different. I'd only ever really faced any of it with fear. If it flickered through my mind as a memory, fear would override me, and that's how I would convince myself that that memory wasn't real or that I was right. Fear drove everything. And what I've come to learn about myself after doing this step, after writing down all of the things that were there. You know, I heard it said once, you can only ever hold one resentment in your mind at a time. But when you write them on paper and what caused them, and you start seeing a bigger picture of the underlying issue within yourself, what AA calls a character defect, shortcoming, when you see the ones that repeat themselves in every resentment you've ever had, every fear you've ever had, you start getting a bigger picture. You start seeing it for more than just a single resentment. You see a stream that runs through you. For me, I didn't know where it hit. I knew I had to stop the stream. I had to find a different way. For me, fear drove everything. Fearless moral inventory. Until I did it, I had no idea how much fear I really sat in. But it makes sense looking back, knowing how terrified I was to put these things on paper. my God, what if somebody finds these sheets? And later on, I have to tell somebody all of these things. And I'll speak more in step 5, but the thoughts that went through my head today as I was talking with people around me, 2 things I've had to do for myself in order to make this radical personality change that I've had, the spiritual awakening that's beginning. I had to love myself and I had to accept myself. I couldn't run in fear of the things I had done. I had to accept them. They are part of the fabric of who I have been. They make up who I am. And at the end of the day, if I choose to be that way again, that's on me. But now I can live in the experience I've had and the harm they've caused, having accepted them as my past, part of Clayton. Accepting those starts breaking down the wall of loving yourself, myself. Loving myself was new to me. I was full of myself. I was egotistical. I was the center of the universe. I was God of my own domain. That was the way I thought. None of it was love. Not a single bit of how I interacted the world came from loving myself. When you don't have capacity to love yourself, when I didn't have the capacity to love myself, the capacity to love others is limited. My brother and I used to joke. I took a test for being a psychopath once, and the lack of empathy I displayed. We used to joke about that. Having experienced empathy now at this age, I know it's possible to do. What I've discovered about myself is I was preventing it from happening because I didn't have love for others in a great enough capacity because I had so little love of myself. So when I started accepting who I was, and trying to find a way to love that man, that is what started when I started writing everything down. When I started seeing how afraid I was of everything. Vast majority of my problem was made up in my own head. Things I told myself I couldn't say out loud. I couldn't be that way. I can't act like that. Most of that was generated by other people in my life. It was never, I won't say never. A lot of it wasn't me from the core. It was layers upon layers of societal expectation on top of expectations of those that come and go in your life. Those things become part of us, and as we let them direct where we go, we lose ourselves. Living for others. It's not the right way to say that. I live today loving myself and trying to share as much love as I can with anyone around me, whatever capacity that might be. But I try to make sure I'm in a place of loving myself so deeply that it can overflow and be shared. It's not always the easiest. There's difficult days. There are days that you just don't want to do anything. But I find when I care for others genuinely rather than because it's the thing I'm supposed to do, it's it's almost self-serving because the more I do it, the more deeply I love who it is I'm becoming. My thoughts today were on acceptance and love. I've done some terrible things. I won't I won't say heinous, I won't say wildly criminal. Nothing. If I were to tell my story, if somebody were to tell my story to me, I could hear it and be at ease knowing that this is a man trying to find his way out. And I know there are stories out there um, that would be difficult to hear and to um, simply just listen to and not have opinions on, which that'd be tough. But I had nothing. I had nothing like that. Um, Putting it on paper and accepting it as reality. That was my reality, not what people did to cause me to resent them or think less of them or not love them to a full capacity. What was on that paper was every reason I was incapable of doing that. And it started with where I sat about myself. It almost, it was really surreal to find out how afraid I was. And to look back now, realizing how fearless it really took to look at myself so deeply and acutely and accept that reality. It really started breaking down my walls to love myself. That was it says it in the Alcoholics Anonymous book. Acceptance is the key. I not only have to accept the world around me as out of my control, whether I want to believe it's a higher power directing the flow of events or simply believe that it's out of my control. There's nothing I can do about it. Accepting that and not having to control everything around me changed my world, changed the way I interact with people, changed the way I interact with myself. I don't secretly in the back of my mind yell at myself, "You're such a scumbag" anymore. I did some shit that I shouldn't have done. Today, the pain of the growth of it, the acknowledgement of it, the acceptance of it has turned me into what I hope is and continues to be the best father I can be, the best co-parent I can be, the best friend I can be, the best employee and employer I can be. And there's always room to grow. And after so much stagnation in my own growth, I am really excited that that is where my focus is and that is what my intention is by doing these things for myself. I was never going to do it until I accepted who I was and I learned how to love myself. For me, that's what step 4 began to give me. It turned my feelings about myself around. I couldn't hide from these things anymore. They're on a page staring me in the face, and every underlying trace of what caused them from within me was right along with them. And those things I start to recognize when they come up. I start to make adjustments to my behavior, to the way I speak, and I start to make a conscious effort that they don't run my life anymore. Today, my life isn't run by fear. My mind isn't run by fear. Today, it's an endeavor to let it be run by love. Starting with the most important man to me. That's myself. And making sure he's taken care of, he's spoken well to, and he's respected. Despite the things he's done, he's still a human being, and he deserves my respect. He's not always been a great man. But by the grace of the universe, he can stay on that path and work endlessly to be one. Thanks for listening.